This Wednesday edition of Pucks Across Borders on Sports Addict Live, YouTube, and on X, brought to you by the one, the only First Round Collectibles. Right now, with our promo code Sports Addict, get 10% off whatever sports card you want in the entire First Round Collectibles store. They have an ongoing sale up to 50% off tons of cards. With our promo code Sports Addict, not only do you get 10% off of regular priced items, but sales items as well. Do the math. 20 becomes 30, 30, 40, 40, 50, 50, 60. You get the picture. So go to firstroundcollectibles.com today. Use promo code Sports Addict for 10% off regular priced and sales priced items. Hockey, football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, boxing. You want it. They got it. Go to firstroundcollectibles.com today. Use promo code Sports Addict for 10% off regular priced and sales price items. That's the number one, STRoundCollectibles.com. First Round Collectibles, sports cards for sports fans.
Yeah. Let's go. We just gotta go hard. I go the hardest. I bring the pain. Not what you used to. It's all part of the game. Yeah, I just gotta go hard. I just gotta go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Yeah. Oh yeah, the beast back. Adrenaline pumping through my veins. Can't relax. Original. I am not the same as these cats. I sting
And welcome. Good morning. Good Wednesday morning. Beautiful day here in Toronto, and welcome back to Pucks Across Borders. Day off yesterday, but we are back. Game 3 tomorrow night. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Today, we're going to look back on Game 2 on the Draisaitl hit suspension. Did the NHL get it right? We're also going to update the Conn Smythe odds, who we think is the Conn Smythe. And I don't really, spoiler alert, I don't really think it's a clear cut. There's a clear cut winner. At the beginning, Connor McDavid was plus 190, which told me that the sports books thought that whether they win or lose, he's probably going to get the Conn Smythe. And, well, here we are now. We're going to get into all of that and maybe more. But first, as always, at the top of your screen, right next to me, you read his work about the NFL on Gridiron Heroics. John, how we feeling on a Wednesday, bro?
Feeling pretty good. I feel like we're getting a preview of what summer sports are going to be like, unless you're a big soccer Olympics person. But yeah, we have a lot of time off in between games lately, and it's starting to feel closer to the end with the way this series is going.
Yeah, I was talking to you guys about this pre-show that it's my anger for the Blue Jays is becoming more and more like at the top. Like I've been keeping it beneath the surface, but I think the closer that we get to the end of basketball and hockey, that baseball anger is starting to rise. So I got to keep that suppressed for as long as I can. And at the bottom of your screen, you read his work on Give Me Sport. You read his gambling picks on Winners and Whiners. Andre, how you feeling on a Wednesday, bro? Good to see you.
It's good to see you guys. I'm feeling pretty good. I know we took a day off yesterday, but we're still active more frequently than the Stanley Cup Finals, so I consider that a win.
Yeah. Whenever I feel guilty about not doing a show, I just remind myself that yeah, we have more shows than the finals has games, so that's okay. All right, well, let's get right into it. First of all, Game 2, 4-1 loss by the 4-1 loss for the Oilers, 4-1 win for the Panthers, and let's get into it. A couple days old now, but I still think a lot of pretty intriguing storylines, leaving me in a really tough spot trying to predict what's going to happen moving forward. I originally predicted the Panthers in 5, and my prediction is looking good. However, after the game 1 on Saturday, I actually left that game feeling better about the Oilers than I did going into it. I thought they played super well. It's a common storyline that Bob stole the show. And so for me, I was like, man, yeah, the Oilers lost, but they look really good and maybe they can hang with these guys. And after game 2, I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting to hear how you guys feel coming out of that game 2. Andre, let's start with you, man. What do you think of the game, and how does it kind of like leave you feeling about the rest of the series?
Yeah, I felt like game 1 was the one Edmonton needed based on how they played.
Yeah.
South Florida played. Wasn't really surprised that in the game 2, Florida looked so much better. Probably should have had another shutout, but that's a different story. And I mean, I picked the Panthers in 6. I still feel like Edmonton should and will steal a game or 2 at home. This upcoming pair, this upcoming trip back to Alberta, if you will. But the Panthers are just so good. I mean, there's nothing more you can really say. They faced Nikita Kucherov 5-on-5. He didn't score any goals. They faced David Pastrnak 5-on-5, 0 goals. They faced Artemi Panarin. Technically, he had 1 goal 5-on-5. It was with an empty net, though, and it was with 90 seconds left in the series. So it didn't really mean anything. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, 0 goals.
Yeah.
The team as a whole has 1 goal. It was from Zach Hyman, of course, but the Panthers are just that good. It'll be interesting to see, 1, if Barkov plays, and 2, if he doesn't, how that affects them for a full 6. But that team is just ferocious. They're on a mission. They deserve a ton of credit and respect for what they've done this postseason, because they have not had an easy path at all, and they've made it look pretty easy.
Yeah, and it's curious because Barkov being down, it's a really, really big deal. And I think that people like us who watch like literally every game every night and keep an eye on all 32 teams, Barkov is not a surprise to any of us. But I think for a lot of like the general hockey fans, Barkov is this like underrated player, right? People don't really know a lot about. But like for us, it's like, oh yeah, Barkov. But this is like, he's a really important part of that team. Very, very complete player, both ends of the ice. That being said, like it's not that you don't need him, because you do, but you just feel like with the style of play for the Panthers, like they can still win this series without him, and maybe not as seamlessly, not easily, because none of these games have been like easy necessarily. But for me, it's more about like Darnell Nurse. He goes down. I think he played like 4 minutes in game 2. I haven't seen too many updates on him. That is a big concern for me on the defensive end. I know that Darnell Nurse has not had a very good playoffs, and I know that the media, specifically in Edmonton, has been just roasting him for the last 2 months. But they don't really have that many other defenders to kind of go to. They pulled Cody Ceci out for Desharnais, and now Nurse gets hurt. Also, Draisaitl does not look right. I think he's had 5 points in his last 9 games, which for like a third line player or a second line winger, maybe that's okay. But for, Leon Draisaitl and the lack of depth scoring that the Oilers already have, that's a big problem. Is he like hurting, not healthy? McDavid, we've been talking about McDavid for the last month or so and how banged up like he looked, that long layoff between the conference finals and the finals, McDavid looks the best that he's looked, just as far as speed, as creating space. The crazy thing for me watching that game the other night, McDavid had the puck a lot, and he's doing spinoramas along the boards, and he's getting into the zone. And it just looked like to me, like the Panthers were like, that's fine, man. Like, do your little spinoramas, do your little move behind the net. You're not getting anywhere close to the front of the net. And it's just like really impressive to me how like the Panthers, they just don't seem stressed. Like they just don't seem overwhelmed. Like the Panthers could have the Oilers rather could have the puck in the Panthers' end for like 3.5 minutes, and the Panthers don't care because they know that you're not getting to the front of the net, and if you do, that puck's not getting through. That's the one thing for Barkov too, is like not only can he produce offensively, not only is he really great defending, that guy blocks like 5-6 shots per game. So that's going to be interesting to see moving forward. For me, listen, I thought that the Panthers would just be too much. I thought that the way, and like the Panthers, we've talked about this for a lot of the year, but specifically in the playoffs, like those guys just don't care. And the refs a lot of times turn their eye. Like who was it? Was it Ekblad who like had Bouchard in like a neck hold, like choking him out to the point where Bouchard was literally like, hey man, like I tap out, like I'm going to pass out here. And there's no call. Like those guys take penalties just to prove a point, and they don't care if they take a penalty, if they get a penalty. 5-on-5 is where they're going to crush you. They finally got through the Oilers' incredible penalty kill, and their penalty, like, especially with the lack of depth that the Oilers have scoring wise, I think the Oilers, what they've proved to me over the last couple series is that what they don't have in scoring depth, they make up for in defensive depth. Like those third and fourth lines are very, very good defending. They need power play goals, and they're just not getting them right now. And so, listen, is it going to be a sweep? I don't think so. I don't think this is as daunting as the Mavericks Celtics series. Clearly, you need to win tomorrow night because you can't go down 3-0 against this Panthers team. Even 2-0 seems very difficult. I don't know. I was so impressed with how the Oilers played game 1, and game 2 seemed to me like a python or like a snake, where like they start choking you out and it's just a slow burn. You know what I mean? Like you just die slowly. Like they just wrap themselves around your neck and then just 60 minutes, just slowly lose life. And by the end, and I got to give a big shout out to John here, because I thought he was crazy throwing out the Bobrovsky save prop. Turns out that was genius, because the Oilers could get nothing on net. What was interesting to me, and I'd be curious to know, John, as I pass it over to you, what was interesting to me as well is that the Oilers in game 1 just shot the puck from everywhere. Whether it was high quality, whether it was low quality, it didn't really matter. They just shot the puck. I don't want to say Bob's in their head necessarily, but they looked like they were looking for that like perfect shot on Monday night, and they never really got it, and therefore their shot total was way down. John, what did you see in that game the other night?
I think this is the first time I've seen Noblock completely panic as a head coach in the playoffs. To me, that was near the end of game 2. That's probably the most on the rails, so to speak, I've seen him this entire postseason. I'm mainly referring to how Edmonton ended the game. They were down by a goal or 2 goals, sorry, with about 5 minutes to go, and they pulled Skinner out of the nets with over 5 minutes left in the game. They started the empty nets that early. And to me, this is just how I read it almost all the time. If you're pulling your goalie with 5 minutes to go when it's 2 goals or less, that tells me a team is panicked. That tells me the coach is desperate, and that tells me you really have no faith in your offense.
I will say though, John, sorry to cut you off, man. I just wanted to kind of throw this out there for that. I felt a little bit differently there because like you're down 3-1, and that was a face off in the offensive zone, and it was a 4-on-4, right? So to me, it felt like with the speed that the Oilers have, 4-on-4 is already awesome. Like, I can't remember if it was that 4-on-4 penalty or if it was earlier in the game, because there were 2 situations where it was 4-on-4. And you saw Paul Maurice like mouth to the ref, like, I don't want 4-on-4. Like, just give me 5-on-5.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want it, because he knows that the Oilers' speed, like 4-on-4, is awesome. So I felt like in that specific play, it was 4-on-4. What, like you said, 5 minutes left ish.
Yeah, about 5
Face
minutes
off.
ago.
Yeah, face off in the offensive zone, pull the goalie. By the time that whole sequence was done, you were at about like 2.5 minutes, and it just made sense to keep the goalie pulled. So I felt that was a bit more situational than it was panic, but that's just my opinion.
I think what clinched it as me thinking this about the Oilers was that they got a power play right after that, and they still kept an empty net, which I think stunned the ESPN crew. They thought Skinner would come back in once the Oilers got awarded the power play, because I think it was like 30 seconds later or something like that. But I'm not fully questioning the move there. I think it just tells me a lot of about what No Block was thinking. I feel like we're going to disagree a little bit on this here, but I get the situational aspect of it. But I think just reading the room for the first 2 games, the Oilers scored 1 goal, like you said, and I agree with this. Draisaitl has not really done anything in the Stanley Cup Finals. Maybe something is wrong for all we know. But the fact is, the Oilers have scored 1 goal in 2 games. It just makes me think they're having trouble getting anything going offensively. And game 2 seemed a lot more one-sided than game 1, despite the final score, to me at least. And I think frustration came out by the end. The Oilers had a couple of cheap shots. I mean, we'll get to the Draisaitl thing, but even besides that, you had some guys taking shots by the end of the game that resulted in ejections, or basically 10-minute penalties that might as well be ejections.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I feel like the empty net thing was an admission that our offense can't do anything, and that I don't know what else to do right now. They have 2 days to think about this. No Block has been very adaptable in this entire playoff run so far, but I think this is about the most lost I ever saw him. Mainly, I guess I read it as just him throwing his hands up, like, I don't know what else to do at this point, and I don't trust my offense straight up to get anything going. Even the power play, which has been a strength of theirs, but Florida's PK has been rather good, and as good, if probably keeping up with Edmonton's PK in this postseason. So I think that's why I'm a little concerned about Edmonton now, because the frustration is starting to come out. The lack of offensive opportunities for them is really visible at this point. And I think that's why I commented on the empty net thing, because I guess I just read it as Edmonton admitting that they're having a lot of difficulties on offense and they don't know how to adjust to Florida's style of play.
Yeah, I do feel like if they scored a goal in like the first minute that the goalie was pulled, I'd be interested to see if they, put the goalie back in for the next like 2.5
Especially
minutes
during the power play.
Yeah, and then just kind of see. But I definitely see where you're coming from, Andre. I feel like you got something to add here, bro.
I feel like we've covered this whole season. You guys should know by now. I cannot stand when teams pull a goalie on the power play, especially when there's like 4 minutes left. You're just begging for some defenseman nobody's ever heard of to have a 198-foot goal and just end the game. I understand it's the Stanley Cup. In that situation, you're down multiple goals. You desperately need something because you have one goal through, let's do some math here, 115 minutes of the series, let's say. You're desperate, but are you going to possess the puck well enough where the Panthers aren't just going to get one and just launch it for free down the ice and have a chance to put the game away? I hate when teams do that. I understand the strategy of it to an extent, but at the same time, you're just risking getting burnt so easily.
Well, and especially with the way, like, when that 4-on-4 turned into the power play, like the way that the penalty kill for the Panthers operates, they give you no space, man. Like as soon as you get the puck, they're on you. And so I definitely see what you're saying. This is a complete side note and somewhat irrelevant to the conversation, but it just reminded me that empty netter goal in game 1. I forgot to mention this after the game. That empty netter in game 1, do you guys remember it? It was like from the red line and it was top shelf. Like it was like, that was the most like perfect empty net shot I have ever seen. It was like right below the crossbar in the right corner. I was like, dude, that is like the cockiest empty net goal that I have ever seen. Like just top shelf, right below the crossbar. That was hilarious. But yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to see. Like, I already said it. I predicted 4-1 Panthers win. As a hockey fan, though, now in this moment, I really hope the Oilers find a way to win tomorrow night. Like, as much as I'm ready for the summer, I want to go out with some drama, like for this series to be over, so it'll be really curious to see what happens in game 3 tomorrow night. It's hard for me to find a path to see the Oilers winning, and maybe it's like recency bias or whatever it is, but they got to find a way. All right. And the interesting thing, John, just real quick, you were talking about at the end of the game with the Oilers getting chippy and some guys getting thrown out. I think it was it Sam Carrick who got fined for his maneuver? Somebody got fined for their end of the game shenanigans. I really liked what the Panthers had to say. I can't remember who it was, but someone from the Panthers was asked about that whole situation. And they just said, like, listen, they were down 4-1, best of 7. Like, we do that kind of stuff all the time. Like, that's what I love about the Panthers, man. They're not oblivious to who they are. Like, yeah, we do that kind of stuff all the time. Like, the mentality that the Panthers have, I just think is just too much. And what we saw in the Stanley Cup Finals last year was, by this time of the Stanley Cup Finals, the Florida Panthers were just so injured and just so deflated that they didn't have anything to give. And I'm wondering if that's now on the Edmonton Oilers side of things, and it'll be interesting to see moving forward. Let's transition here to the topic of conversation that was all over the last couple days. Leon Draisaitl's hit to Barkov. Barkov left the game. There's a couple different talking points that I have on this, and I'm interested to see what you guys think. But let's start with you, John. What did you think about that hit? Are you surprised that he wasn't suspended, wasn't fined? What was your take on that whole situation?
Not surprised he wasn't suspended. I think it would have taken something even more egregious to take Leon Draisaitl out of the game. And I'm not going to pretend professional sports organizations don't have their biases. I mean, look, if we're keeping it real, this is Leon Draisaitl we're talking about here that committed this hit. I think a fourth line player absolutely would have been suspended for that hit, or like a lesser named guy. But you're not.
Or if it was Draisaitl on like a Tuesday in November.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up too. So I think the situation here is very important because the hit itself, I'll just say that I think the hit itself could warrant at minimum a fine, perhaps probably a suspension in the right situation, but not in the Stanley Cup final and not for the second best player on the ice. I don't think you could take a guy like that out of the game, even if it cost another big player to leave the game. I think in this situation, a fine would have been appropriate, but I guess maybe the NHL is maybe afraid to admit there is a bias, even though we all know there is one. I think in this situation, a fine and or maybe a delayed suspension. By that, I mean maybe suspend him for like the first game or so at the start of next season in the regular season. Because you're right. I think, like you said, on a Tuesday night in November, he would have got suspended for that. But you're not suspending that guy in the Stanley Cup final. And quite frankly, I don't want the NHL to suspend in this situation, especially with the Oilers down 2-0. You need to keep people coming back. And at the end of the day, it's a business. So I think ethically and by the letter of the law, yeah, he committed a hit that probably warrants a fine at minimum, probably a suspension, but I don't think realistically it was ever going to happen in the Stanley Cup final, the suspension aspect at least.
Yeah. Well, and I was a bit surprised that he didn't get fined.
Yeah.
Just because like for every reason you just said, I'm not surprised he didn't get suspended either. I 100% agree with you. And I think I think that's the pretty standard thought process here is that like, unless he like Donald Brasheared the guy in the back of the skull, I don't think he would have got suspended. But that being said, I feel like it would have been an acknowledgement that like, we're not going to suspend him, but we're going to do something. Like, look, we find him. Like we didn't do nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, rather, like, if you don't fine him and you don't suspend him, and I mean, listen, some people think that hit shouldn't have been suspension worthy or fine worthy. I don't agree with it. I think clearly Draisaitl knew what he was doing. I mean, it wasn't the elbow. It wasn't anything like that, but he knew, like, he was going for the head. He was going for the upper ball, or at least I'm going to put my forearm up here. And if it hits his head, it hits his head type of thing. But I thought that a fine would have given the NHL at least this, like, hey, we did something. We didn't do nothing. At least we fined him. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I felt about it. I have another interesting thought when it comes to the Barkov side of this, but Andre, go to you first. What did you think of that hit and the suspension, or the non-suspension in this case?
I mean, I'm kind of In the same boat as John, I think just common sense wise, where they were never going to suspend Draisaitl during the Stanley Cup Finals. He would have had to decapitate somebody for it to even be a consideration. In most other instances, though, this should have probably been a suspension, especially since McDavid got cross-checked on a somewhat similar play in these playoffs, and the guy that did it got a game. So Draisaitl picked the perfect time, I guess, to for a dirty play, but this was never going to be anything for better or worse. The NHL is notorious for being awful at player punishments and whatnot. But now that there's no suspension, now that Barkov practiced today, Draisaitl's playing tomorrow, or when's the next game? Today is Wednesday, right?
Tomorrow night.
Today's Wednesday. Okay, that's tomorrow. Now the Draisaitl's playing tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see how the Panthers kind of police it, since, I mean, they've kind of been given free reign to. Draisaitl's going to be there. Draisaitl didn't get punished by the league. It's time for them to do something. They're up 2-0. They're not afraid to take a penalty as is. So things could get nasty in Edmonton tomorrow.
I'm glad you mentioned the policing thing, because you kind of made me think of something here. I feel like the NHL is going to let the Panthers get away with a shot at Draisaitl now, as long as it's not like literally chopping his head off. You know what I mean? I think they're going to let them do something to him, because they kind of know Draisaitl got away with one, in terms of, hey, if it wasn't the Stanley Cup final, you would have been suspended for this.
Well, I haven't heard this talked about too much, so this is just my own personal opinion. I haven't really seen it out there in the media or anything like that. Excuse me. But the fact that Warren Fogle got kicked out of the game for that knee-on-knee, which I don't know. Penalty, yes. 5-minute major, getting kicked out of the game. I don't know. I don't really feel like that was necessary. But you did it. You kicked him out. No fine, no suspension for that, but you kicked him out of the game, 5-minute major. He paid his price or whatever. I feel like it's difficult when you kick a guy out for a knee-on-knee that could or could not have been an ejection, could or could not have been a 5-minute major, and then Leon Draisaitl forearms a guy, a kind of miniature Scott Stevens, not quite.
Man down?
Did we lose him?
Yeah, we got a man down.
Oh, damn. Okay.
In the middle of a Scott Stevens. He always loves
it's like one of my favorite parts. I know.
You think it crashed, or he's coming back? I think he's gone.
I'm letting Mark know in case he doesn't know already, but we'll see. So, man, I kind of wish I knew where he was going with that, because that seemed like a good rant.
Yeah. Worst time to lose him.
For sure. Sorry for the viewers out there. We're kind of trying to figure out where Mark stands here in terms of, like, if he's aware this happened and what's going on with him.
Yeah. While we're waiting on him, though, we can jump into Conn Smythe. When he hops back in, he can finish his chicken wing rant. So before, Mark touched on it earlier in the show, like at the very beginning, but before the series, McDavid, best player in the world, he had the best odds by far to win the Conn Smythe. The next few guys, it was Barkov, Kachuk, Bob, I think, were all the guys like under plus 1,000. Panthers are up 2-0 now. It's going to be a lot harder for McDavid to win, and Mark is back, so he can keep going about Scott Stevens. Welcome to the club.
Hey, man.
I think he's frozen again, though.
Back.
I'm here. You guys got me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could hear you now.
Dude, I did play-by-play for a local Rogers TV network last week. They better hire me or I'm out of here. Rogers, I'm telling you this right now. If you don't hire me, I'm out of here. 11:30 on a Wednesday afternoon and my Wi-Fi just disappears. Anyway, whatever. We do what we got to do. My point, all of my point was, I know that you moved on to the Conn Smythe thing, but I'll just say this real quickly. I just think it's a bad look to kick Warren Fogle out of the game, but then when it's like Leon Draisaitl, like, nothing to see here. What I will say, the one quick thing just to wrap this up, and like I said, I know you guys moved on, but I wanted to get this point out here real quick. Barkov, how is he not in concussion protocol? And we're talking about how you're not going to suspend Leon Draisaitl in the Stanley Cup playoffs. If Barkov is in concussion protocol, then by protocol, he can't play for a week. Right? So, to me, that is almost a more interesting conversation than Leon Draisaitl. Barkov was down. He looked shaky. He got hit in the head. I am curious about that. I don't know. Did you guys think about that at all? Or because to me, I was like, if he's in concussion protocol, he's out for the next like 3 games. And what are they going to do about this?
I still don't think they suspend Draisaitl even if he is.
No, I'm not talking about Draisaitl anymore. I'm talking about Barkov. Like, why is he not in concussion protocol? Like, you know what I mean? Like, shouldn't he be?
Some of that miracle water in him. What did Russell Wilson used to pedal?
There's an old saying in the
water.
playoffs. Yeah, I think a lot of things tend to get the back shoulder a little bit. People look the other way in this stage of the game.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. That was what kind of popped into my head as I was watching. I was like, or thinking about it more yesterday too, being like, man, if he does have a concussion and like the league finds out, like with all the conversation about CTE and concussions over the last like decade and a half, like you would think that something would happen, but hey, maybe not. All right, let's move on. Again, I know you guys already moved on, but I wanted to get that Barkov concussion thought out there because I thought that was really interesting. Andre, I interrupt you, bro. I apologize. Where were you at?
Oh, I was just, holding it down while you were gone. I wanted to hear what you had to say. We were going over the odds, the Conn Smythe odds. Now the Panthers are up 2-0. I believe where I left off was McDavid now plus 500, not the favorite anymore. Granted, if the Oilers come back to win it, he'll probably end up taking it home, but they have to score for that to happen. Right now, the odds on favorite is Sergei Bobrovsky at minus 200. Pretty heavily favored because McDavid is next at plus 500. Barkov is plus 550. Kachuk is now plus 2,000 to round out that top 4, if you will. So that's just where I was with it. I'll let you start it off. Where do you see Conn Smythe heading now? What do you think about the new odds? Do you think anyone can steal it from Bob at this point? Because the first 2 games, he was dominant.
Yeah.
At least statistically.
Well, I mean, listen, this is very obvious. This is nothing earth-shattering here. But it just depends how long this series goes. Like, I think that you have some really, 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 really good value with everybody else now. I think like Connor McDavid plus 500, like you said, man, if they come back and win this series, Connor McDavid is probably going to have to be the McJesus that everybody refers him to, right? Like, so to me, like you're getting terrific value everywhere else from like a, betting standpoint. If you got some scratch, like Connor McDavid plus 500, awesome. I think from a Florida perspective, I don't see anybody else really being valuable when it comes to the Conn Smythe. I think there's some fun ones, some interesting ones. Like Rodriguez already has 3 goals in this finals. Like if Rodriguez continues to go on this heater and gets another 2, 3, 4 goals, if he finishes the Stanley Cup, like he has 3 right now in the finals. So if he finishes the finals with like 6, 7 goals, like I don't know, why not? Plus 6,000 for Evan Rodriguez. That you know what I mean? Like there's some fun ones like that. I think Barkov plus 550. I feel like on the Florida side, you're probably going Bob or nothing right now. Any other bet that you're making is hoping, like any other bet besides Bobrovsky is trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. You're not really betting on what you've already seen. If you're betting on what you've already seen, then it's Bobrovsky or nothing for me. But I think McDavid plus 500. If the Oilers do come back to win this series, they're going to need him. I think Rodriguez is a really fun long shot. He already has 3 goals. Maybe he gets more, plus 6,000. Other than that, though, I don't really see anybody else breaking through here. I don't know. John, what about you?
I mean, I think the odds reflect pretty much how I feel about this. Bobrovsky, I think, is pretty much his to lose at this point, especially with Florida being up 2-0 and having the game 1 that he's had. I mean, I think game 1, Bobrovsky arguably won almost single-handedly. I know I'm exaggerating there, but I think he was the key piece. In game 2, he held up pretty well too. So I think if you're going to give it up to a player on Florida, and I do believe the player on a winning team should get it for the most part, unless there's like an insane performance, then I think Bobrovsky has to be it right now. But if you're looking for another Florida player that's maybe valuable, because I think at this point the value for Bobrovsky's gone. You had to do it before the final started to really get something there. I think Verhaeghe has decent value too. If there's any player worth a shot on Florida, it might be him. I believe he's plus 3,000 now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he has 10 goals in the playoffs. So if he puts up a couple more goals in these next couple of games, there could be an argument for him, especially if one of those goals ends up winning the Stanley Cup or clinching it for the Panthers. I think McDavid's about the only Oiler you can really count on at this point that has a shot at winning it. I know I said Draisaitl before the Cup final started, but I don't think he's producing quite enough at this point now. And McDavid's definitely starting to lap him a little bit. Whereas the first half of the playoffs, I thought Draisaitl was the better player or better performer. But I think it sounds about right. Bobrovsky, the favorite, McDavid, second. And I'll throw Verhaeghe out there as like a dark horse, but I wouldn't expect him to win it. That's just if you want a player with some value.
I think that's a really good point that I don't think that you meant to make, but that you did make that reminded me of something here, is that this is a Stanley Cup playoffs MVP. This is not strictly the finals. The finals have a big factor in it, obviously. But this is like for the whole playoffs. It's not like the NBA. I think the NBA is just based on the finals, right? Like the NBA, they don't do their finals MVP based on the whole postseason. Correct, Andre?
Yeah, it's just the finals MVP.
Yeah, where the Conn Smythe is a totality of the playoffs are factored into the Conn Smythe. So that is an interesting point where if Draisaitl does come back from the dead here a little bit, and have an incredible last few games and they come back to win this series, I don't think Draisaitl is completely out just because he's had such a phenomenal playoff so far. Same thing with McDavid. That makes my Rodriguez point a little bit invalid, but I still like it. And you're absolutely right about Carter Verhaeghe. Andre, what do you think, bro? Unless you've already said. I did miss a few minutes there.
I didn't say actually. Yeah, I think if the Panthers going into the series, I said if the Panthers are to win, it's going to be because they keep Edmonton's offense in check, and that'll obviously look good for Bob. So he probably should be the odds-on favorite for them. He's improved to just for the series odds-on favorite. I was just surprised he wasn't to start the series.
Yeah.
And then to Verhaeghe, I think he's only has 1 point total in the last 4 games. So that's really slowed down the ball. He was absolutely dominant for the first 2.5 rounds of this postseason. And I mean, if he lights it up in Edmonton, these next 2 games, lights it up in game 5, he could very easily sneak back in that conversation. So I think Carter Verhaeghe, if you're looking at a different Panther, is probably the best bang for your buck at this point. I believe he only has 1 fewer point than Barkov and Tkachuk. Obviously, he's leading the team in goals for the playoffs. So, at plus 3,000, he's a lot better than Tkachuk and Barkov in odds. So I think that's a good one. Rodriguez's game 2 put him in the conversation, but I think it's a little too late for him to make it up. If the Oilers get it, I think it's too late for Draisaitl as well. Hyman really only has goals, so he's not going to be the guy. If it's not going to be McDavid, I think Bouchard's the only other option if you're looking at Edmonton to come back and win this series. Maybe Skinner if he has like 3 shutouts in a row, but let's be real here.
Well, I was just about to make that point, Andre. I'm glad you brought it up. Stuart Skinner, let's just be real about this. Game 6 against Dallas, he was the reason that they won that game. That plain and simple. Game 1, he lets in the first goal of the game. And even though he didn't face that many shots, he was pretty lights out for the rest of it. Even game 2, like Skinner to me hasn't been the problem, which I thought that if they lost the series, it's because Skinner was a problem. And he hasn't let in, like there's a couple goals there that haven't been great, but for the most part, Skinner's actually played okay. I don't expect him to win it. There's a reason why he's plus 20,000 to win the Conn Smythe. I'm just saying, if you got some bankroll, you want to throw $10 on Skinner. If they come back and win this series, I think there's other guys that will get it first. I think you're absolutely right. But I think Skinner's not the worst long shot option here. The only thing not the only thing, but the big thing that keeps Skinner back from winning it is being pulled in the second round for 2 games, right? Like that is not good. But I don't know. I'm not completely writing Skinner off for this. John, you disagree with me so hard. I see your face over there. What?
I was going to say, if it was just the final, I'd agree with your point, but I can't look past the first half of the playoffs for Skinner.
That's fair.
And this is not even just the Vancouver series. This is going back to the Kings series too. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
Skinner stepped up for sure and earned back his position, but like the first half of the playoffs, we were questioning if Skinner should even be in the Nets. So I don't think I can consider him for a playoff won award there.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I think Skinner. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, obviously, but I think if he dominates the rest of the series and the Oilers comes back to win, I think he just did well enough where he could have legit consideration for it. I mean,
I don't know if he'd steal it.
His save percentage would get back over 90, right? You think his
it's worth a sprinkle, Andre?
Average, huh?
It's definitely worth a sprinkle.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Like, imagine, like let's say, perfect 4 games, they win 4-2. The Panthers score 1 more goal for the entire series, maybe 2. You're talking 15-7, right? Save percentage, you'd assume like at that point 905 and up. Goals against average, 2-2-5, 2-2-ish. 3 shutouts, maybe 4 shutouts. If they win, if they're low scoring games like 1-0, 2-0, it's not it's pretty crazy assuming the Panthers only score 2 more goals for the rest of the series, but it's an option.
What makes it crazy is that if they do come back and win this series and Skinner just stands on his head and lights out, you would have to assume that Connor McDavid goes on a run, right? Like that, what makes it crazy is that like before you get to anything else, it's Stuart Skinner or it's Connor McDavid is going to have himself a series, right? You'd have to assume. At plus 20,000, like listen, John, I'm not saying that you're going to put 200. If you had $210, if I gave you $210 and you have to put this on 2 guys, you have to put $210 on 2 guys. You're going to put $10 on Skinner and $200 on whoever else you think is actually going to win it. You know what I mean? But I think that $10 is worth. It's worth it on Skinner.
I don't think I'd even put $10 on him.
You're no fun. You're no fun.
He's not the guy I would do it on. I think Verhaeghe would be the guy I'd do that with.
$10 on Skinner is 2,000, John.
That's what I'm saying, bro.
Put it on Draisaitl at least.
Fair.
I think Andre, what we realized is he likes Happy Meals rather than steak. He just wants. He doesn't want to.
If you're trying to say I'm not a big risk taker, then that might be true.
I don't know. I've not gotten to know you quite a bit over the last year. I think you like risk aplenty. But anyway, I digress. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Let's move on. Let's move on and let's move out. We will be back. My computer, full disclosure, I spilled coffee on my computer before, and now it's just has a mind of its own. But anyway, we'll be back tomorrow to preview and get you ready for game number 3 in Edmonton. Big shout out to First Round Collectibles, promo code SportsAddict, 10% off regular price and sales price items. Give us a follow, a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.